The broadcast is now.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining today. So today we're going to cover a new feature in Dynamics 365 version 9 called Virtual Entities. So my name is Mitch Milam. If you haven't contacted me before, you can reach me via email, on Twitter, connect with me on LinkedIn, and I would advise you to go out and subscribe to my YouTube channel so that you get notification of any of the videos I post. All the videos that I that I shoot with my webinars or other things are automatically put up there. So if you're signed up for notifications via your YouTube subscription, then you will get notification whenever I post something. So it's a good thing to have. A little bit of housekeeping, everybody is muted, but if you want to say something, just put it into the question box or raise your hand with the little raise your hand icon there on that little flyout on the left-hand side, and I can open up your mic for you to ask a question. So let's get right into it. So this is available for Dynamics 365 version 9 online only. It's not available on premises right now because there is no version 9 on premises as we speak. I think that's going to change sometime soon, but who knows. So what do you need to know about this? Well, the idea of a virtual entity is to be able to pull data in from an external location. So part of the external location that we have to do is what we call an OData feed. And part of your understanding of how this is going to work is the format of the data coming back. That means you need to know XML at the very minimum. There's a thing called a .edmx file format, which is pretty much an entity diagram in XML is all it is. As you can see here, this is going to be a data source we're going to use today. All this is a list of data items found inside of this demo, OData demo data source. We have products, featured products, details, categories, etc. We're going to be working with advertisements today. And as you can see, for advertisement, we have the key name, which is the ID, followed by the other fields and field types that are part of all of this. So you have to understand really how all this works and how to actually access it. You also need to know something called JSON, which stands for JavaScript Object Notation. So this is another thing that comes back as a format, and all it is just a representation in the JavaScript language of data. And what you can see here is the same feed that we saw earlier, except for the fact it's just the very top high level. So what this is showing you is the different more or less database tables that are available within this and what they're called. So again, we're going to be working with the one called advertisements. And this is important because everything that we do within CRM has to match exactly the way that it is created inside of whatever data source you're connecting to. So let's talk about that for a moment. So the default data source is an OData version 4. So this ships out of the box. It's actually a solution that gets installed. There's also evidently an Azure Cosmos DB data source that is on AppSource. I have not played with this. I just noticed this in the documentation. So Cosmos DB is what they call a document database. So it's free-form storage, in other words. It's not rows and columns like your typical SQL database. So haven't actually played with that. Has anybody played with using a data source that's not OData by any chance? I don't see anybody. Okay, I don't know when that was added. It seemed kind of new to me, so that's something we may have to investigate later. So there are some limitations, of course. The biggest thing that you're going to see is this is read-only data. So you're going to be able to see it within Dynamics 365, but you can't edit it at all in any way. And therefore, since you can't edit it, the things that make up the data, editing things, are not going to be enabled. So for instance, skip this first one, but auditing and change tracking. We can't enable it for queues. There's no offline caching. It cannot be an activity type. There's no business process flows because business process flows require data inside of the table. And once you create it, you can't switch it back to a non-virtual entity, that's just kind of common sense, because once you create an entity, you can't modify anything as far as the naming goes. So it's the same. The first one, the second one there, the organization-owned entity, there's two types of entity ownership within the definition itself. One is organization-owned, which means it doesn't have an owner. It's owned by the organization. The second one being user/team owned, which means it's owned by a user or team. And what happens is, based on that decision, Dynamics 365 will automatically add database fields to the table, the SQL table directly, and to the entity, which you can see within CRM, of course, to surface that type of data. So, for instance, you'll have, if it's organization owned, you basically just have the business unit ID. If it's user owned, you have the user or team ID as far as the owner of the record goes. Just kind of while we're here, team ownership or organization ownership is generally used for things like validation data, like zip or postal codes, things like that. People don't need to own that. It's just owned by the organization, whereas accounts, contacts, leads, opportunities, things like that need to be owned by a person or a team of people. So that's one of those things to think about. As far as the data model goes, the most important thing is the ID field of the external table must be a GUID data type. So the reason that's the case is because CRM uses GUIDs for most things as the key to find the record. So that's the key to that, is you have to actually use that key to pull data back. What you'll end up doing is all of the properties of the feed, the external relationship there, are going to be represented by Dynamics 365 attributes, which are fields. We have the simple data types, so text, numbers, option sets, dates, images, and lookups. The next to last bullet there, you must be able to model any entity relationships in Dynamics 365. I think really what that is talking about is if you have a relationship defined within CRM itself, you have to have the lookup field, which is the other end of the relationship inside of the external entity. So basically, there's got to be a lookup field type. Also, the attributes cannot be calculated or roll-ups. Again, it goes back to the read-only nature. Since calculated and roll-up fields are calculated on a daily basis or manually and updated, there's no way to do that, again, because it's read-only. So for developers, we can programmatically create a new virtual entity, just like we can create any kind of virtual entity. The only caveats to some of these things now is if you are in the position where you're actually creating entities via a programming language, which I've actually never done in a production environment because it's just too much work. You have to specify or not specify data, but the data must be either null or real values. So there's a couple different fields they have in there. The same rules apply to manual creation. So basically all of the required fields have to be populated. The big thing is, the first thing that we have to do, which we'll get into in just a second, is we have to create a data source. That data source is just a reference. So it's just a record within CRM. And we can actually use that ID to the data source to create our new virtual entity. If that data source doesn't exist, then it's going to produce an error, of course. So that is literally all the background. How about we go do some work? Okay. So first thing we have to do is actually create a virtual data source. So I'm in the Settings Administration tab. I'm going to click on the one at the bottom left-hand corner, Virtual Entity Data Sources. And as you can see, I've already got a sample created in here. Let's just go look at that. Okay, so a couple of things here. You can specify additional parameters to pass to the data source if you want. In our case, we're not going to do that. But what you have to have is a URL that's valid that points to the surface. So if we take this URL that we have and we put it into a new browser window, this is the data we get back. Okay, so as you can see here, here's information about the service itself at the top row. Then we have a collection called products, product details, categories, suppliers, persons, person details, and advertisements. So this tells us what is in this data source that we are connecting to. And again, that's all this is just a definition of a connector. Okay, so again, you can specify additional parameters if you want. There's additional request parameters. So if you have something specific that has to be passed into, maybe like authentication or whatever it might be, this is where you will put those. Okay, so this is step number one. Then we actually have to go and create a new entity. So let's go do that. So I've got the default solution open. So that would be settings, customization, customize the system. And I think I've been playing around, so I'm just going to call this my advertisements. Oops. And I am going to click the virtual entity checkbox. Now, you'll notice that when I do that, things on the screen change. So the first thing that I have to do is specify the data source, which is called sample. If you look behind the dialog, you'll see that's what we have here. And again, this is why we have to have the data source created first. Now, the external name has to be the name that we're going to be using here. So which one do you think we would use for that? Anybody have any ideas? How about advertisements? Okay. So this works very similar to that. So we have an external name and then an external collection name. So if you look at this over here on the XML file, you'll see that this is actually called a collection, and the collection has an S at the end of it. So the singular version, if I could spell it, advertisement. Is that better? Yeah, there we go. Okay. So those two fields are required. And then what will happen is, let's put it on, let's see, put it in settings. And then you'll notice that some of these things have turned off down at the bottom because they're no longer valid. Okay, because it knows we're in the virtual entity. Okay, so I'm going to save this because after we save it, we have to go back and actually do some more work on it. So what it's going to do, it's going to go out to our data source, it's going to connect to the data source, and then pull back information about the advertisement entity. Okay, well, we've got a problem here, so let's see what this is. Let's open the error message. No, shoot. Sorry about that, folks. Let me go back. I've already got one of those in there, so let me go kill it. That's what happens when you test things out. You get bit in the butt sometimes. So basically what happened is it already saw that I had an advertisement in here, even though I called it something different. It recorded that information, the internal information, and realized I was trying to do more or less the same thing twice. It didn't let me do that. So let's try this one more time. Oops, you know what? That's not what caused the problem. Okay, I made another mistake here. We'll get another error. We'll fix that. This should produce an error. Who can tell me why? Yep, that's it, Nigel. You got it. I just saw the same thing. Yeah, I forgot to put an S when I corrected the name of the S. I didn't type the S in right here into the collection name. So it should fail. If it doesn't fail, that's going to freak me out. Okay, well, that was weird. So let's go ahead and save that again. Probably should change that to see, such as, does it pull the data from the external source at the time of the entity creation itself? We're about to find out about that. Okay, so this is kind of interesting when we get into the configuration here. I'm going to change this one here too, just for giggles. Sorry about that. Okay, sorry, I guess I won't do that. Okay, so let's go to our fields. Now, we have two different fields that it created. And the reason it created those two fields is because of the data we pulled back. So let's go, let me go get that URL real quick. Okay, I'm going to jump over to, actually, oh, sorry. I had a tab open and I think I closed it. Sorry about that. Okay, so there's a thing called the OData Data Explorer. And all these links, by the way, are in various websites that I have on the page that I'll be sending everybody later. So I'm going to pick this OData v3 sample service, which puts in our URL that we're using here. And when I click the get metadata, what it's going to do is give me a list of the collections that we have, which we just looked at earlier in XML format. When I click on this advertisements, I'm going to see I have three fields. I have an ID, a name, and an air date. Okay, here is my, let me bring full metadata. See what happens. Is that working? Okay, can everybody see that? I know it's kind of small. Okay, so this is full metadata for this thing. So as you can see, I've got a bunch of OData information, blah, blah, blah. Then I have a type for the ID, which is edm.guid. Then I have the ID. Then I have the name and the, which is a string. Then I have a field called air date, which, as I can see from the data type for air date, is a edm.datetime. So basically I have three fields. I have a GUID for the ID, a string for the name, and then a date and time for the air date. Okay, so I'm going to go back and my entity here, my field. So first thing you have to do, believe it or not, is go in and put in the name of the field here, ID. I don't know why they don't do this. Okay, I truly don't. So what it did, even though it created this field, it doesn't know that the external name of the field is called ID. So we have to supply that. Okay, so I'm going to put the ID in for the external name and save and close this. I'm going to go back to my entity and I'm going to open name up. I said I'm going to go back to there and open my name. Here we go. And again, the field external name is empty. So I need to put in name. Unless I'm horribly mistaken, this is case sensitive. So capital I, capital D for ID, capital N, lowercase for the rest of the name. That's what, as far as I know, the thing is. I haven't tried it recently with some other thing. Okay, now I've got an air date, so I need to go and add that as well. So I'm going to add a new field here. I'm wondering if somebody knew I was doing a webinar and therefore they could put the slowdown flag on this instance. Okay, while that loads, Sean has a question. Can you generate proxy classes for virtual entities to use in strong typing? Sean, as far as I know, yes, you can use the proxy generator because it is an entity. So as soon as you add we'll do what we're doing here and publish it, we should be ready to go. Okay, so air date. Okay, It automatically pulled in the external name there. It's going to be a date time. Okay. And then I'm going to save and close this. So that's going to create the field. There is one thing I was missing here, which is on the ID. If I go back to the definition there, the ID is a required field. So what I need to do is actually specify that it's a system required. Otherwise, it will get kind of upset with me, I think. But yeah, Sean, back to your question. Yeah, so once it's in the system, you should be able to use it in a read-only fashion. So it's your typical entity. So you can use it throughout the system. You can export to Excel. You can perform advanced find. It works just the same as everything. So, okay, it is required already. Perfect. Okay, great. Okay, so now we have all that. Let's go to our form and edit it real quickly. Put in the air date, which is our only other field we have. And then I'm going to add the default view, about that one. And we'll add the air date to that. Oops. Okay, save and close. Publish this. Whoops, I guess I have changes that need to be saved. Okay, and I'm going to publish this. So again, besides the virtual pieces, it's just like any other entity within CRM. Okay, it's just read-only. That's really the key here. Okay, so I'm going to go back here and I'm going to do a Control F5 to refresh my browser. So what we've done so far is we've made sure we had a data source. Then we went and created the virtual entity itself. And then we are going to look on our sitemap to see if we have a My Advertisements in settings once it reloads. And it's mad at me now. Okay, so sales settings, and we have My Advertisements under extensions. Okay, it did not like that. So let's go back, see if we did something wrong here. Just refresh that just for giggles, just to make sure. Okay, so it did work. Okay, so collections advertisements, spell it correctly. That's that. Primary field is name. Air date, that is the field name, right? Air date. You know what? Well, that looks all good to me. Okay, let me go back and make sure that my Services.odata.org v4 OData OData.svc. That is correct. Let's see. Alejandro says maybe advertisement without the S. No, it should be just advertisement is the actual name of the entity, and then it has a plural name. Make sure. Yeah, that should work. Advertisement, advertisements. I think that's correct. It should be. For grins, let's just copy their version in case I did something wrong. I'll tell you what. Let's just here. Just for giggles, let's just make both of those advertisement. Publish this, just in case you're right. Rodney says I think they have to be the same. I didn't think they had to be because I'm looking at another document that says they didn't. But you know what? I have been wrong before. It was like last year. I forgot what day, but it was a bad day. Whatever. Okay, so let's go through this again. I'll refresh. This did work before. I have seen it work, so. What is going on with this today? Okay. Settings, my advertisements. It doesn't like something because that's taking a very long time to load. It's only 2 records. Okay, let's go to advanced find, see if this works with any better. Okay, it's not an advanced find. Okay, now I'm kind of confused. Okay. Well, this is a good demo, isn't it? Okay, so what am I missing here? That. Here goes the demo gods aren't happy today. I know, man. That is just weird. You know what? Hang on a second. It's silly, but I know this is so odd, but hang on. Nope, I don't want to do that. Sorry, I was just checking that, make sure it was okay. Sorting is on name. Okay, that's fine. Yeah, that's what I was afraid of. I think we confused the heck out of it. Okay, so ID. Okay, that looks good. Name with the N, capital. Okay, I must do that. Actually, this was required. Oh, such and says it's under my advertisements instead of advertisements. You're right. Sorry about that. Okay, so let's see if that had anything to do with it. So basically, air date was a required field. I don't know why that would have anything to do with it, but let's just try it anyway. I have noticed this is very, very specific, and as you can see, it doesn't always give you data about what the problem is, besides you did something you didn't like. There's also a possibility the speed at which the system is working this morning, it could be that something is happening that is causing a problem. Roddy said that's why we love dynamics. Yeah. Okay, let's try it one more time. Let's go to advanced find first. There we go. Now it's there. Okay. So this is fascinating. Like I said, it's very, very specific. And what happened, and I don't know how to get to the definition. I think I'll take that, put it over here, and I asked for, was it? Is that what I wanted? Yeah. Okay. Product. So what I did, I just asked for that same stuff with the metadata, so it gave me back the data about the data. Let's close all this. As you can see, this nullable is equal to false. So what this is saying is this is a required field. Like ID is a required field, air date is a required field. So what was happening was somehow it knew that. Okay, so I had not set it. I actually set it on the name field instead of the air date field. So basically, now that we have that going, so we have it in advanced find. I wouldn't have the column for advanced for the air date because I didn't add it. If we go back over to our data, you can see the air date and the name. If we open it up, you'll notice there is no possibility to do any editing because it's read-only, okay, and it knows it is, as you can see from the read-only tag down here. So that's pretty much it. I just thought I would, let me look at something real quick, see if I've added, no. Okay. So yeah, so once you've done this, this is going to act pretty much just like any other entity. And the main idea here is what we would, prior to this, what we would do is we would actually create an entity, set up a scribe or an SSIS job to pull the data over into CRM and to display it, and we work with it normally. That is still an option. But there are times where we just need to display data from an external system. Now, again, the primary caveat to this is you have to have an OData feed for us to consume. If you're consuming internal data and your development staff hasn't done that, or if you are the development staff and they haven't done that or you haven't done it, then you have to create an OData feed. Class, can you retrieve data using JavaScript, SDK, plugins, create? Yes, again, this is a Dynamics 365 entity at this point. That's how it's being displayed. So as you saw, I did an advanced find on that entity. If I did other queries, it would work the same way. Tell you what, let's just go do that real quick. Hang on a second. If I was, try that one. Let's just go try it. How about that? That'll solve all the questions. So I'm going to install Jason Latimer's REST Builder. Does everybody know what that is? If you don't, go look it up. It is a very valuable tool for developers for sure, and also for administrators, and you're about to find out why. So just look for CRM REST Builder. What I do, just go for Jason Latimer GitHub, do a search for that, and you'll find his tools up there. See another MVP, got some very good stuff. Okay. I'm just having the best luck today. Okay, so this is REST Builder. So what it is, it's a self-contained solution. On the configuration tab is actually the user interface that you work with that it just disappeared from. So basically the way this works is you select how you want to query, the action you want to query, how you want to query it, different things, if it's asynchronous or synchronous. And then what I'm going to do is go down and select my, oops, it's going to be under new. In my advertisement. Then I can actually specify different things about what I want and things like that. Here are the fields I want to see, so I'll just select those and click on Create Request. It's going to generate some JavaScript. When I execute this, it's actually going to run it. This is using JavaScript, as you just saw from this code right here, that's actually performed a REST query against that data feed, just like it was in CRM. If I had specified a count, it would have been the same thing. Brian says, the fact that the external data ID must be a good seems to be a pretty major limitation. I don't know the decision with that. I'm assuming it's because all of CRM's data types are like that, except for the fact where they're not. And because we have alternate keys, as you know, but I think it still creates a good ID internally. That's just a limitation we'll have to deal with. So if you have the data feed that doesn't have a good for the ID, you're going to have to create one somehow. So yes, that is a kind of a big deal. Jeremy says, you mentioned Cosmos DB option. Yes, it's in App Source. I haven't done it, but evidently the data provider for the Azure Cosmos DB is in App Source. So I was actually kind of shocked to see that because I have no clue how that would come over. If you guys don't know what Cosmos DB is, it's like I said, it's what they call a document database. So it's a different way of storing things. It's more freeform than rows and columns. So if you're kind of curious, go just do internet search on that. Rodney says, if the data in the source changes, will it display the next time I open the virtual entity? As far as know, Rodney, yes. So I don't think it stores any data in CRM, but I haven't tested it 100%. I think every time you do a query, it's actually all it's doing is just surfacing the data in the UI. So when you open the record or when you open the view, wherever it is, it's actually going to go and perform the query right then. That's my understanding. I haven't seen it be any different. See, Clayton says, can I use a virtual entity to look up a record in a normal entity? What a relationship between two entities. Okay, that's what I was describing earlier. You have to have a lookup field on your virtual entity, because that's how CRM works. When you create a relationship between two entities, it will put a lookup field from one to the other to tie it back the one part, the one-to-many, for instance. The one-to-many is actually a two-directional relationship. In one direction, it's one-to-many, and the other direction, it's many-to-one. The one-to-one has the ID pointing to the parent, or the many. Sorry, pointing to the parent. So in the links on the page I'll send you after the video gets uploaded to YouTube, I have a list of blog articles, and one of the Microsoft guys actually goes into that and shows another data set that has this exact setup. So you can take a look at that. Jeremy says that Cosmos DB rocks. Well, Jeremy, where is your webinar at, dude? Okay. Okay, Sasha asks, does Dynamics 365 trigger workflows or plugins creation updation of virtual records? No, it does not do that kind of thing on creation or update, because we don't create or update. Remember, virtual entities are read only. So there is no create or update to work with at all. There is one example that's again in the show notes that will actually point you to how to create a plugin to work on retrieve, to change data as it's shown up if you've ever done that. If you didn't know it, if you get into the plugins, anytime you do a query, show a view of whatever it might be, or an advanced find, it actually generates what they call a retrieve multiple message, which is what we're using right here. This code here. So what happens is you can actually intercept that programmatically using a plugin and either change the data coming into the query or change the data as it goes out of the query back to the user. And it's really freaky. It's got to be used with extreme caution because you can totally screw your entire system up. But the one example that I saw with a plugin with virtual entities was modifying, I think, the display values as it came back out. Rena says, wondering how the performance would be of the data if it's huge. Isn't it a real-time call? Yes, as far as I know, it is a real-time call, but it also is paged. So if you go back to the definition of the data source, you specify what your paging mechanism is. So this one is client-side paging or server-side paging. Should you return an inline count of what you have? Also, what is your timeout in seconds? Okay, so you're not getting the entire data set. It's only going to return a page to you at a time. And what I'm assuming is that they're passing I'm sure OData has a protocol. In fact, I know they do for paging, and what they're doing is they're passing in the number of records to show as the paging mechanism is probably what they're doing, just like they do with CRM. So if you didn't know, internal to CRM, when you get a data set back, it will actually page between the many records internally. Cole asks, what about the OData endpoint has some type of access security? That's what the other parameters are for. Or it's going to have to be inside of your network. These are the examples you see are going to be public facing, but you're going to have to just look. Again, this is just OData, so whatever OData security is, which is generally your local security, is going to have to be taken into account. So it's not going to do anything if it pops a box up and asks you to enter credentials. That's not going to happen, right? Because that's just not going to work. So whatever data source you're accessing, you either pass into the security token, which is possible, or you're going to have it in just working in the local security context, so like on premises or within an organization where it's validating your Azure ID or your Office 365 ID. Super. Yes, the recording of this demo will be on YouTube, like all of my webinars are. Alejandro says, now that we have this working, the entity configuration was left with both internal and external collection names. Dude, you just like to play with fire, don't you? Okay, let's go change it back. Okay, we're going to go change this back to singular. I'm going to save it. If this doesn't work, dude, this is your fault. Okay, everybody else is having a good time. But anyway, again, going back to what we use this for, what we use this for is to display data within CRM that doesn't have to be inside of CRM. But again, the main limitation is read only. If you cannot get past that, you have to recreate your structures, import it into CRM in some way, and then basically just go from there. This should work. Like I said, I was using another article that said use exactly the same thing. So, and that's what my other one did. It did exactly the same thing. Yeah, I think the thing that was making this not work was my not putting the required system required business required on the air date field. That's what the problem was, not the name. So what we just did there, folks, was we corrected the name. We have the internal singular name of the entity and then the plural or the collection name. So we thought that it had to be the same. It does not. Super says, does a CRM create a new database, new table and database? To my knowledge, it will create it's going to create a table, but there's no data in it. That's what my understanding is. So, or it may just create a definition within the metadata itself, but there is no data to my knowledge inside of CRM. At least I have seen zero reference to that. I could be wrong. Veneer says, why does the view name still say all my advertisements? Because the view was created at the time of the entity creation, and I changed the name later, and it doesn't retrofit it. That's what that was for. I had fat fingered at my advertisements and hit the W instead of the S because I was in a hurry, and that's my my finger that doesn't work correctly. Yeah, Alejandro says he's trying to understand what the values used internally. As far as I know, the way it would work is the external name is going to be the singular name, which is going to be advertisement. So that's one instance of that data type. The collection name is going to be the one that's plural, the one that you see right here. Okay. So like if you go to the full metadata for this service, you see we have advertisement. And if you had gone to basically to the top level, you see advertisements, like the plural version. So that's where I'm getting those pieces of data. Koa says, can we use it with Flow? I don't know. I don't see why not. No, we can't. And here's why we can't. No. Okay, I'm wrong. I haven't even started on I'm wrong. Let's just go do it. What the hell? Flows. Create a flow. Remember, we talked about this in one of the other webinars on V9, but the way that the flows work from within the CRM, the Dynamics 365 interface, is you select a record and you do something with it. So it's either going to work or not work. Why is it not popping up in the box? Oh, Jesus, what did I call this? Hang on a second, sorry. If this is going to make me do the whole sign up thing, then we're going to have to wait because it takes too long. Okay, that. When the record is selected, add a new step, use an action. How about what do we do? Create an email? Well, how about not in the middle of my demo? Okay, sorry. Yes, I talk to the computer because sometimes it talks back. Okay, so hey, look at that. It read everything out of that thing. So I think the answer is going to be it's going to work just like it normally should. But again, we can't create data with it or update data of that record. So we're just pulling data out of it. So that should work just fine. Okay. So I don't have yeah, I haven't actually been in the flow for this, so nothing's turned on. So yeah, so I think the answer will, yes, it will work for flow. That's interesting. Thanks for pointing that out. I like that. Thanks, Colin. Uh, can I display a local SQL table using virtual entity? Again, if you have an OData feed for anything, remember OData is generic. If you have an OData feed and it has an ID column that is a GUID, you can surface it within the virtual entity framework. Yeah, so basically you got that. Yeah. So yeah, and it's not just setting up that SVC URL. You have to create the whole thing. This is creating an OData data source is kind of a big deal. You have to create a website to do that, or a web page, or yes, both. Okay. Okay. Well, cool. This has been kind of entertaining for me today. Hopefully, it's been entertaining for you. Any other questions? Nope. Okay. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. Like I said, as soon as I get everything converted and uploaded to YouTube, I will have it to you. So have a great weekend. And this, I think this will be actually I said last week this will be that would be my last, but this is the last one of the year. So for those of you who celebrate Christmas, have a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Stay safe, and you'll be hearing from me before the end of the year. And Happy New Year. Thanks, everybody.